Malik Carter, a 12-year-old boy, lived with his parents in the heart of Central City, where hardship weighed heavily on every cracked sidewalk and dimly lit street. His family had once known stability when his father, Derek Carter, worked tirelessly as a factory laborer, providing for them with steady hands and unwavering dedication. But fate had been cruel. A sudden stroke had stolen his father's strength, reducing the once capable man to someone who struggled to lift even a spoon. His speech, once firm and confident, had become slow and fragmented, a painful reminder of all he had lost. With Derek unable to work, the burden of survival fell entirely on Malik's mother, Maria Carter. Every day, she labored long hours at Lola's diner, taking extra shifts just to scrape together enough for rent and food. She would return home late at night, exhaustion evident in her slow, weary steps, yet she always forced a smile when she saw Malik, as if to shield him from the weight of their struggles. But Malik wasn't fooled. He noticed the way she rubbed her temples when she thought no one was looking, how she carefully stretched meals to last another day, and the growing pile of unpaid bills on the kitchen table, their edges curled from neglect. He heard the hushed whispers between his parents late at night, their voices laced with worry they assumed he couldn't understand. Malik understood more than they realized. He saw the stress eating away at his mother, the quiet resignation in his father's eyes, and the unspoken fear that loomed over their small, dilapidated home. He knew, deep down, that things couldn't go on like this. While most boys his age were focused on school and play, Malik's mind was occupied with a singular thought: he had to find a way to help. He couldn't bear to see his mother working herself into exhaustion or his father feeling helpless and ashamed. No one was going to fix their situation for them, so Malik made a decision: he would do whatever it took to lighten their burden, even if it meant stepping into a world far beyond his years. Determined to help his family, Malik threw himself into a relentless search for work. Every afternoon after school, while other kids rushed home to play or do their homework, he walked through the streets of Central City, scanning storefronts and peering into windows, hoping to find a sign that someone, anyone, was willing to give him a chance. He stopped at corner stores, gas stations, and small restaurants, stepping hesitantly through their doors, his voice steady but hopeful as he asked the same question over and over again. "Do you have any work for me?" Each time, the response was painfully familiar. Some shopkeepers gave him a pitying smile and shook their heads. Others barely spared him a glance before waving him away. "You're too young," they would say. "Try again in a few years." Their words stung, but Malik never let his disappointment show. He simply thanked them and moved on, his small hands clenching into fists at his sides. He had no time to feel sorry for himself, not when his mother was coming home later and later each night, her feet dragging with exhaustion, not when his father sat in silence, staring at the bills piling up on the table with a look of quiet defeat. Days passed, then weeks, and still, Malik found nothing. The constant rejection weighed on him, but he refused to give up. He couldn't. Each night, as he lay in his small, worn-out bed, he reminded himself why he was doing this, why he had to keep going. His family was depending on him. So, every day, he woke up and tried again. Then, one cloudy afternoon, as he trudged through downtown, Malik's eyes landed on something that made his heart skip a beat. Taped to the side entrance of Lincoln Trust Bank was a small, unassuming sign: "Help Wanted." For a moment, Malik hesitated. A bank was nothing like the corner stores and gas stations he had tried before. It was big, intimidating, its towering glass windows reflecting the gray sky above. Would they even consider hiring a kid? Would they laugh at him, just like so many others had? He could already hear the rejection forming in his mind. But he quickly shook off his doubts. He had come this far. He couldn't afford to walk away now. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. The bank's interior was grand, its marble floors gleaming under the bright overhead lights. He suddenly felt small, out of place, but he forced himself to keep moving. His eyes landed on a tall, thin man with graying hair and sharp features, Mr. Thompson, the bank manager. Swallowing his nerves, Malik approached the man and straightened his posture. "I can clean," he said, his voice firm but polite. "I just need a chance." Mr. Thompson barely looked at him. He sighed, rubbing his temple as if already regretting the conversation. Night shifts only, he muttered after a long pause. Stay out of trouble, do your job, and don't touch anything that's not yours. Got it? Relief flooded Malik's chest so fast it almost knocked the air out of him. He nodded quickly. Yes, sir, he replied, trying to keep his voice from shaking. That night, as the sun dipped below the skyline and the city lights flickered to life, Malik arrived for his first shift. The bank, which had been full of life and movement during the day, now felt eerie and still. The quiet hum of security cameras filled the empty space, the polished floors reflecting the dim glow of the emergency lights. Armed with a mop and a bucket, Malik got to work, sweeping, wiping, emptying trash cans. It was tiring, repetitive work, but he didn't care. Every dollar he earned was one less hour his mother had to work. Every shift he completed was a step closer to making things better for his family. Despite the fatigue tugging at his limbs, Malik felt something he hadn't in a long time: pride. He had done it. He had found a way to help. And no matter how difficult it was, he wouldn't let this opportunity slip away. What he didn't realize, however, was that this small job would soon change his life in ways he never could have imagined. Malik had grown used to the quiet, methodical rhythm of his life, school by day, work by night. Though exhaustion clung to him like an unshakable shadow, he never allowed it to slow him down. Every step he took inside Lincoln Trust Bank, every floor he swept, every trash bin he emptied, felt like progress, like one more contribution to lifting the weight off his mother's shoulders. He had learned how to move unnoticed, blending seamlessly into the background, navigating the grand, marble-floored bank with quiet efficiency. That afternoon started no differently. The golden light of the setting sun filtered through the massive windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Bank tellers exchanged pleasantries with customers, the rhythmic tapping of keyboards and the distant murmur of conversation filling the air. Malik pushed his mop near the supply closet, his mind already planning how to finish his tasks quickly so he could go home and catch a few precious hours of sleep before school the next day. But then, the world around him shattered. The heavy glass doors exploded open with a force that sent a violent gust of wind surging through the room. The sudden bang made Malik flinch, his breath catching in his throat. Before he could fully comprehend what was happening, 6 masked men stormed into the bank, rifles raised, their movements swift and calculated. Panic spread like wildfire. Gasps and startled cries filled the space, but they were immediately silenced by the sound that came next: ****, a gunshot, ****. The deafening crack sent a tremor through the building, its echoes lingering like an unspoken warning. Shards of plaster rained down from the ceiling, scattering across the floor like tiny white daggers. Malik's entire body went rigid, his pulse hammering so violently he could hear it over the stunned silence that followed. "Nobody move! Hands up now!" The command rang out in a sharp, merciless voice. The leader of the group, a towering figure clad entirely in black, stood at the center of the chaos, his rifle held with an ease that spoke of experience. His presence alone demanded control, and the terrified bank patrons obeyed without hesitation, their hands trembling as they raised them in surrender. Malik's instincts screamed at him to hide. His feet, moving before his brain could fully process, carried him backward into the supply closet. He pressed himself into the shadows, heart pounding so violently he feared it might give away his position. The cold metal of the door handle dug into his palm as he struggled to keep his breathing shallow, controlled. Through the narrow gap between the door and its frame, he watched in frozen terror. The robbers moved with ruthless precision, dragging bank employees from their desks, shoving customers to the floor. One guard attempted to intervene, but before he could fully react, he was struck down with a brutal blow to the head. He collapsed, motionless, as horrified gasps filled the room. The leader of the group took slow, deliberate steps across the floor, his voice dripping with sinister amusement. "We're not here for your wallets," he announced, his tone unsettlingly calm. "This is about something much bigger." His words did little to ease the terror gripping the hostages. Malik could see it in their wide eyes, in the way their hands trembled where they lay pressed against the cold marble floor. Then, the leader's gaze landed on an elderly woman, her silver hair neatly curled, her fragile hands clutching her purse as if it could somehow shield her from the nightmare unfolding around her. "You," the man sneered, his rifle now aimed directly at her chest. You look like the kind of person who thinks heroes still exist." The woman let out a small whimper, shrinking away, her entire body trembling. Malik clenched his fists so tightly his nails dug into his palms. Fear paralyzed him, but alongside it, something else burned, a growing, undeniable anger. He had seen helplessness before. He had watched his mother wear herself thin, had witnessed his father's silent resignation. But this, was something else entirely. This was wrong. His mind raced. He had no strength, no weapons, nothing to fight these men with. But he didn't need those things. He had something else, his wits. Swallowing hard, Malik forced himself to breathe, to think. His entire life had been about survival, about adapting to impossible situations. And this moment, this terrifying, life-threatening moment, was no different. "I have to do something." His fingers twitched against the closet door, his brain already piecing together a plan. It was reckless. Dangerous. But he had no choice. The robbers had control now, but if he played this right, he could change that. Taking one last deep breath, Malik made his decision. Malik's breath came in shallow gasps as he crouched in the dim supply closet, his pulse hammering against his ribs. His entire body was taut, every nerve on high alert. Fear gripped him like a vice, urging him to stay hidden, to remain still and safe. But beyond the thin wooden door, the muffled sobs of the terrified hostages and the commanding voice of the masked leader rang in his ears. The robbers had complete control of the bank, their presence turning the once bustling building into a prison of fear. And yet, despite his terror, Malik felt something else growing inside him, a deep, burning determination. He couldn't just sit there. He had to act. His mind raced, frantically searching for a plan. He was just a kid, small and unarmed. The robbers had guns, numbers, and experience. He had nothing, except his wits. Malik took a deep, steadying breath, trying to push aside the fear clawing at his insides. Think. Find a way, ***. Then, a memory flashed through his mind. Earlier that week, he had seen two men in dark suits visiting the bank manager's office. Unlike regular customers, they hadn't waited in line. Their eyes had been sharp, their movements careful and practiced. They had spoken in hushed voices, scanning the bank as if they were studying it. At the time, Malik had barely noticed them, but now it clicked. FBI agents. If they had been in the bank before the robbery, there was a good chance they were still inside. And if they were still here, they might be his only hope. Swallowing hard, Malik steeled himself and peered cautiously out of the supply closet. The lobby was still a scene of controlled chaos. The robbers moved with terrifying efficiency, keeping their weapons trained on the cowering customers and employees. The leader stood tall, his cold gaze sweeping over his captives, exuding confidence and power. Malik knew he had to move carefully. He stayed low, his small frame making it easier to slip into the shadows unnoticed. Every step felt deafening, every breath too loud in the suffocating silence. His palms were damp with sweat as he crept along the edges of the room, keeping his head down, his movements slow and deliberate. His destination was clear, the bank manager's office. If the FBI agents were inside, he had to find them. Reaching the office door, he hesitated for only a second before peering through the narrow crack. His stomach clenched at what he saw. Inside, two men in dark suits sat slumped against the wall, their wrists bound with thick zip ties. Their faces were bruised, but their eyes were sharp, scanning the room, assessing the situation even in captivity. A single armed robber stood guard, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his attention focused on the hallway. Malik's heart pounded. This is my chance. Summoning every ounce of courage, he pressed himself against the doorframe, inhaled a shaky breath, and slipped inside. His movements were silent, every muscle in his body tense as he crouched beside the first agent. The man stiffened at first, then turned his sharp gaze onto Malik. For a second, their eyes met, one filled with urgency, the other with surprise. Then, understanding dawned in the agent's expression, and he gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. Malik's fingers trembled as he reached for the first agent's restraints. The plastic tie was tight, biting into the man's wrists, and Malik struggled to find the right angle. His hands were slick with sweat, his breath coming faster as he worked frantically, each second stretching unbearably long. Come on, come on. Finally, the zip tie snapped. The agent's hands were free. Malik wasted no time moving to the second man, his heart racing faster with each passing second. Hurry, hurry, he fumbled with the restraint, his hands shaking slightly, but then, snap, the second agent was free. The first agent immediately reached for his hidden radio, speaking in a hushed but firm voice. Code red. Hostages secured. Need backup immediately. Malik barely had time to feel relief before reality came crashing back. The guard. He was still there. Malik's eyes darted to the armed man still standing near the door. Any second now, he would notice something was wrong. Think. You need a distraction, ***. That's when he spotted it, ***, the bank's emergency alarm button, ***. It was mounted under the manager's desk, just a few feet away. If he could press it, the deafening sirens would throw the robbers into disarray, giving the agents a chance to fight back. His pulse thundered in his ears. It's risky. If you get caught, ***. No. He pushed the thought away. No time for doubt. Summoning his courage, Malik took a deep breath, steeled himself, ***, and made his move, ***. Malik's entire body was rigid with tension as he forced himself to move. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might give him away. Every step was careful, deliberate. He kept his body low, creeping towards the bank manager's desk where he had seen the emergency alarm button. His breaths came in short, shaky bursts, his mind screaming at him to be cautious. One wrong move, and he would be caught. The supply closet had felt safe, a tiny cocoon where the chaos outside couldn't reach him. But out here, in the open, every movement felt like an invitation for disaster. He could still hear the masked leader, Carson Hayes, barking orders to his men in the lobby. The robbers were growing more agitated, the tension in the air thick enough to choke on. The customers and employees lay frozen on the marble floor, their eyes wide with fear, too afraid to even breathe. Malik knew that if the situation escalated any further, someone would get hurt, or worse. His only hope was the alarm. The red button was just within reach now, hidden beneath the edge of the desk. Malik stretched his fingers towards it, his hand hovering inches away. His pulse was deafening in his ears, his skin slick with sweat. Almost there, just a little more. Then, disaster, His elbow grazed the side of the desk, producing a soft but unmistakable thump. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. Malik froze, his breath catching in his throat. Across the room, the armed guard stationed near the office door stiffened, his head snapping toward the noise. Malik's blood turned to ice as the man's narrowed eyes swept the room, searching for the source of the sound. He heard it. Malik's mind screamed at him to move, but his body felt paralyzed. His fingers twitched, still hovering over the button. Do it now! The guard took a step forward, suspicion flashing across his face. His grip on the rifle tightened. With a surge of desperate courage, Malik slammed his palm down onto the alarm button. A piercing siren screamed through the bank, shattering the tense silence. The sound was ear-splitting, bouncing off the marble walls in endless, disorienting echoes. For a single heartbeat, the entire bank was suspended in shock. Then, chaos erupted. Out in the lobby, the robbers' control crumbled instantly. Some spun toward the doors, expecting law enforcement to burst in at any second. Others swore and shouted, scrambling to regain control. Their carefully planned heist was unraveling right before their eyes. The FBI agents wasted no time. The first agent, now freed, lunged at the unsuspecting guard, striking fast and hard. The man's rifle clattered to the ground as the agent tackled him, locking him into a tight hold before he could so much as cry out. The second agent bolted for the office door, shouting into his radio. Move in! Now! But while the agents had gained the upper hand in the office, the robbers in the lobby were still in charge, and they were furious. Carson Hayes whipped around, his face contorted with rage as the blaring sirens shattered his composure. His dark eyes scanned the room, and then, they landed on Malik, Malik barely had time to duck before heavy footsteps pounded toward him. His stomach lurched in panic. Run! Hide, but he wasn't fast enough. A strong hand seized him by the collar, yanking him up with terrifying force. Malik gasped, his feet leaving the floor, his body weightless for a split second before he found himself face to face with the leader of the heist. Carson's grip was crushing, his fingers digging into Malik's shirt as he held the boy up like he weighed nothing. His eyes were dark and merciless, filled with fury. Well, Carson sneered, his voice dripping with venom. Look what we have here. A little rat causing big trouble. Malik's breath came in ragged gasps. His arms flailed for a moment before he steadied himself, forcing his body to go still. Panic clawed at his chest, but he swallowed it down. He had to think. Stay calm. Don't let him see you're afraid, **. Carson reached into his belt and pulled out a pistol. In one smooth motion, he pressed the cold, unyielding barrel against Malik's forehead. The entire bank fell deathly silent. Hostages gasped. A teller stifled a sob. The remaining robbers shifted uneasily. Malik's heart nearly stopped. The gun felt impossibly heavy against his skin, the chill of the metal sending ice through his veins. His mind screamed at him to fight, to thrash, to run, but where would he go? There was no escaping the iron grip of the man holding him. Carson leaned in closer, his breath hot against Malik's face. His voice dropped to a menacing whisper. Any last words, hero? Malik could feel his heartbeat pounding against his ribs, a wild and unrelenting rhythm that matched the terror coursing through his veins. The cold, unyielding barrel of Carson Hayes' pistol pressed against his forehead, sending a wave of icy dread washing over him. His breath came in shallow, uneven gasps, his lungs straining against the overwhelming fear tightening around his chest. His mind screamed at him to run, to fight, to do anything, but he couldn't. There was nowhere to go, no way to escape. He was trapped. The bank had fallen into a deathly silence. The hostages lay frozen on the floor, their faces pale with horror. Some had their eyes squeezed shut, unable to watch what was about to unfold, while others, too terrified to look away, stared at Malik with helpless expressions. Even the other robbers had stopped moving, their hands hovering uncertainly near their weapons. This wasn't how the heist was supposed to go. Carson had planned for control, for intimidation, for a clean escape. But now, everything was unraveling, and the fear in the air had shifted. It was no longer just the hostages who were afraid, the robbers, too, were beginning to realize they had lost control. Carson's grip on Malik's collar was tight, his fingers digging into the fabric of the boy's shirt. His dark eyes burned with rage, his nostrils flaring as he studied Malik's face, searching for any sign of weakness. His finger twitched against the trigger. Malik swallowed hard, his throat dry, his entire body screaming at him to act before it was too late. And then, through the chaos, a thought struck him, **. Carson was hesitating, **. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Malik saw it. The moment of doubt. The brief flicker of uncertainty in the man's eyes. Seizing his only chance, Malik forced himself to speak. His voice wavered slightly, but he held firm, refusing to let his fear control him. If you hurt me, he said, deliberately slow and measured, the FBI will never let you walk away. He paused just long enough to let the words sink in before adding, but if you let me go, maybe you can still cut a deal. The room seemed to shrink around them, the tension thick enough to choke on. Carson's grip on Malik's collar remained firm, but his eyes flickered, just for a second. A second was all Malik needed. The leader of the heist clenched his jaw, his teeth grinding audibly. Malik could see the war raging inside him. The instinct to dominate, to stay in control, was battling against the cold, hard reality of the situation. The blaring sirens outside had grown louder. More agents were coming. The net was closing in, and deep down, Carson knew it. His hesitation was all the FBI needed. A sudden, sharp crack echoed through the bank as a sniper's bullet tore through the air, slamming into Carson's shoulder. The impact sent him staggering backward, his grip on Malik finally breaking as he let out a pained roar. His pistol slipped from his grasp, clattering to the marble floor. Malik stumbled away, barely managing to catch himself before falling. Everything happened at once. The FBI agents burst through the entrance, their weapons raised, their voices cutting through the chaos. Asterisk asterisk FBI. Drop your weapons. Hands where we can see them, asterisk asterisk. The remaining robbers panicked. Some dropped their guns immediately, throwing their hands up in surrender. Others hesitated for a fraction of a second too long, and paid the price. The agents moved with practiced precision, subduing each criminal with swift, calculated efficiency. Carson, now writhing on the floor, clutched his wounded shoulder, his face contorted in agony. Blood seeped through his fingers, staining his dark clothing. His breathing was ragged, furious. He had lost. Malik stood frozen, his chest heaving, his hands trembling as he took in the scene around him. His legs felt weak, unsteady beneath him. His mind was still reeling from everything that had just happened. A warm, steady hand landed on his shoulder. Malik flinched instinctively before realizing it was one of the FBI agents. The man crouched slightly, leveling his gaze with Malik's, his expression filled with both admiration and gratitude. "You're one brave kid," the agent said, his voice firm but kind. "You just saved a lot of lives today." Malik exhaled sharply, his entire body sagging with relief. His vision blurred for a moment, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of everything that had just transpired. He had done it. He had stopped them. Across the room, Mrs. Evelyn Morris, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, stepped forward. Her movements were slow, almost cautious, as if she couldn't quite believe it was over. She reached for Malik's trembling hands, wrapping them in her own. Her grip was firm, reassuring. "You're a hero, young man," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "A true hero." Malik blinked, his heart still racing, his body still trembling. The word hero felt strange, almost foreign. He hadn't done it for glory or recognition. He had done it because it was right. As the sirens wailed outside and the flashing lights illuminated the bank's shattered remains, Malik finally allowed himself to breathe. The next morning, the city outside remained the same, asterisk asterisk gray, worn, and weary asterisk asterisk, its cracked sidewalks and rusted street signs a reminder of the struggles that clung to its people like an unshakable shadow. But inside Malik's small home, something had shifted. A weight, one that had hung heavy over his family for as long as he could remember, felt suddenly lighter. Malik sat in the tiny living room, his hands clasped tightly together, his fingers gripping each other as if trying to ground himself in reality. The events of the day before still played in his mind like a vivid dream, too surreal to fully believe. The masked men, the hostages, the gun to his head, the moment he made his choice to act, he could still feel the cold steel pressing against his skin, still hear the panicked breaths of the people around him, still remember the crushing fear. But now, in the quiet of his home, it was over. He had survived. A sudden knock at the door made his heart jump. His mother, standing by the kitchen, wiped her damp hands on a faded towel, exchanging a nervous glance with his father before hesitantly stepping toward the door. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the knob, a habit formed from years of expecting bad news, landlords demanding rent, bills they couldn't pay, yet another obstacle life had thrown in their way. But when she opened it, the man standing outside was not there to take something from them. He was there to give, asterisk asterisk. A well-dressed man in a perfectly tailored suit stood at their doorstep, his expression both composed and kind. His sharp eyes scanned the room briefly before settling on Malik. A small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter," he greeted politely before his gaze fell on the boy sitting on the couch. "And you must be Malik." Malik's heart pounded. He recognized the man from the news reports that had played on the small, flickering television in their home last night. Richard Morris, the owner of United Trust Bank. The son of the woman Malik had unknowingly saved. Richard stepped inside, carrying a stack of neatly bound documents in his hands. He moved with an air of quiet authority, the kind of presence that made people listen before he even spoke. And when he finally did, his words changed everything. "These," he said, placing the papers gently on the worn coffee table, "are the deed and ownership documents for a new home. A mortgage-free house, fully paid for. It belongs to you now." Silence. Malik's mother stiffened, her breath catching in her throat. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. His father, who had spent years confined by his illness, weighed down by financial burdens, sat motionless, his eyes wide, as if he couldn't trust his own ears. Malik felt a lump rise in his throat. A home. A real home, asterisk asterisk, not a rundown rental with a leaky roof, where eviction notices stacked up like unpaid debts. A place they could call their own. A place where his mother wouldn't have to constantly glance over her shoulder, fearing the next overdue bill. But Richard wasn't done. He turned back to Malik, his expression softening with something deeper than gratitude, asterisk asterisk respect. Admiration, asterisk asterisk. "And for you, Malik," he paused, allowing the moment to settle. "A full scholarship. To any college of your choice." Malik's breath hitched. College? His mind struggled to wrap around the concept. College had always been a distant, untouchable dream, a world meant for kids who didn't have to worry about money, about survival, about making sure their family didn't fall apart. A future had never felt like an option. His mother let out a choked sob, covering her mouth with both hands. Tears streamed down her face, her body shaking as she turned to look at her son, as if trying to confirm this was real. His father, a man who had spent so many years fighting against life's hardships, reached out, his hand gripping Malik's shoulder with a strength that hadn't been there in years. His touch was heavy, not with burden, but with pride. Malik could barely form the words. His voice came out small, shaky. "Thank you." Richard Morris smiled warmly. "No, Malik," he said sincerely, "thank you, your courage saved my mother's life. This is the least we can do." As the banker left, Malik stood in the doorway, watching him disappear down the street. The weight of everything settled over him, not as a burden, but as a realization. Life had changed in ways he never thought possible. That evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of gold and violet, Malik sat outside their new home. The air was thick with the scent of fresh paint and warm evening breeze. Inside, he could hear his mother humming softly as she moved about the kitchen, a rare sound, one he hadn't heard in years. His father, standing taller than he had in a long time, walked through the house, his fingers tracing the smooth walls, as if trying to memorize the feeling of stability. Outside, a crowd of reporters had begun to gather, eager to capture the story of the boy who had risked everything. They wanted interviews, pictures, headlines that would call him a hero. But Malik didn't need their words. He didn't need their recognition. He hadn't done it for the cameras or the praise. He had done it because it was right. As the last rays of sunlight faded into the darkening sky, Malik took a deep breath, letting it fill his lungs. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just surviving. He was living, asterisk asterisk. Central City still bore the weight of hardship, its streets still lined with struggle. But here, in this home, in this moment, hope had finally found its way in. And that, more than anything, was the greatest reward of all.